The online manosphere pushes a narrative that women over 30 are too old to be attractive or dateable and usually don't realize that they have missed their opportunity to settle down with a man who they feel meets their now too high standards.
Unfortunately, what happens is they then can't get that guy. They're alone, upset, and again, ultimately, point the finger at guys saying, "I know good men out there."
This process is called hitting the wall. On the other hand, men over 30 are in their sexual prime and will only ever date hot, young, thrill-seeking women without ever settling down.
When guys get to be in their prime and realize that they are what you can call high value, all of a sudden the guys realize, hey, I got options. I can take my time. I can date multiple women if I want to. And if they don't like it, too bad. There's plenty to replace her.
And so then when they're in their 30s and ready to settle down, what happens? The guys are not ready to settle down. Why? Because they're having fun with a 20-something.
This is a pretty important narrative to, alpha red pill types, and essentially forms the philosophical backbone of everything they believe. Is there a small grain of truth to this? Well, let's just say that as far as conspiracy theories go, the idea that there are some middle-aged women out there who have made no effort to take care of themselves or stay attractive, and yet act like they still command the same attention from men that they did when they were in college, is probably not going to make anyone dress like a Viking and storm the Capitol. But it's still mostly bullshit. Let's talk about why. So before we really get into it, I just want to hammer out this narrative in detail so that we're all on the same page about what the claims that are being made are. Also so that if there are any red pillars watching this who feel that I'm getting any of their basic premises wrong, they can correct me and I can adjust my arguments accordingly. So here's how it works. Men and women both experience something called sexual market value, or SMV. This is a 1 through 10 numeric identifier signifying how objectively attractive and desirable a person is. According to this narrative, a woman's SMV is based mostly around youth, beauty, traditional femininity, and to a lesser extent, childbearing potential.
We don't care about your job, ladies. We don't care about all the years that you've dedicated to building your career. We don't care about that stuff. What men value is physical attractiveness, youth, and fertility. That is what we value as men. We don't care about your career.
Therefore, her sexual prime, or age at which her SMV is at its highest and she has the most freedom to choose the partner she wants, is in her late teens and early 20s.
Now, women, their prime is their late teens and in their 20s. Okay, that's when they look the best physically, and that's when they can have the best options to get what they want.
18 to 28 years old. That's the prime window where women are at their peak sexual agency. The only real agency women have in this life is their sexuality.
By age 30, she, quote, hits the wall, or reaches the point at which her SMV has declined lower than the minimum SMV in men that she's willing to accept.
For most women, on average, they hit the wall by the time they hit 30.
Especially if they're relatively unattractive, overweight, have kids, or are over the age of 27.
This decline in SMV is due to things like her natural aging, steadily increasing body count, bitterness that she's developed from a decade or more of fruitless dating experiences, and, when applicable, single motherhood status. On the other hand, men's SMV is based more around his social and financial status, which means that a man's sexual prime is in his 30s and 40s, when his career, money and savings, personal and professional reputation, and time spent in the gym all begin to come to fruition.
A guy's prime begins in his 30s and goes on to 40s, in some cases 50s, depending how he takes care of himself, because that's when a guy's starting to find his place in the world. He's starting to do well for himself. He's starting to becoming who he really is, more confident, better socially.
For men, you're not going to hit the wall at 30, okay? You're not going to hit the wall for a while. And for men, I don't even believe there is a wall. From what I've witnessed out there, and a lot of the badass dudes I've seen out there, it's still crushing it in their 60s and 70s. These guys have no wall.
This creates a dynamic where women start to wane in attractiveness at around the same time that men start to wax, thereby resulting in women feeling entitled to committed relationships with wealthy, attractive, top-tier men, not realizing that these men are now out of their league and are exclusively dating younger women. So while men in their 30s and 40s are using their newfound attractiveness to date beautiful women in their 20s, putting off settling down until they absolutely have to, women either price themselves out of the dating and marriage market altogether and end up alone and miserable, or begrudgingly enter unhappy marriages out of desperation with stable yet uninteresting men who, while objectively on or around her own attractiveness level, she considers beneath her due to his being less cool than the guys she dated in college. She'll then proceed to spend this marriage fantasizing about and even cheating on her boring-ass husband with Chad and Tyrone, or super attractive bad boy type men, white and black men respectively, who all women secretly want. This cycle is called alpha fucks, beta bucks. Winners: women who married a nice career-building man during her sexual prime, men who are attractive enough to be considered Chads and Tyrones without ever getting married. Losers: women who spent their sexual prime riding the carousel rather than locking down a husband, men who squander the newfound sexual attractiveness of their 30s by marrying the first woman who shows any interest. If you don't spend any time interacting with real people in the real world, this narrative probably seems airtight. But there are some problems. For example, number 1, women are still hot in their 30s. Jesus fucking Christ. So if this whole narrative strikes you as nothing more than an elaborate ruse to rationalize a phoebophilic or even pedophilic behavior,
I'm in my mid-40s now. I'm easily still dating girls in their late teens, and early 20s. There's this one 19-year-old girl that I've been seeing.
The idea that women are not conventionally attractive in their 30s is ridiculous to the point of farcical. There are absolutely no physical characteristics a woman has in her 20s that are any different in her 30s. 30s are just the 20s plus confidence, maturity, life experience, financial independence, and emotional stability. Most of the hottest actresses and supermodels are in their 30s. And sure, plenty of people do totally let themselves go in their 30s, but like, these are usually people who have already partnered up and settled down and usually have kids. These are not the people red pillers are talking about. And if you think that most single women in their 30s are any more hard up for sex and relationships than they were in their 20s, you are just simply not living in reality. I will admit to maybe being a little biased because I found women in their 30s hot when I was a teenager, and I find women in their 30s hot now that I'm in my 30s. But the idea that there's any discernible difference between women in their mid to late 20s and a woman in her early to mid 30s is just such bullshit that if you actually believe that, I legitimately question whether or not you're even attracted to adults, if you know what I mean. Especially if you actually believe that the cutoff line is between 23 and 25.
Okay, that is a woman's prime, generally from the age of 18 to 23. That is typically a woman's prime for me. After the age of 23, once she starts to hit about 24, 25, that's when she starts to lose the fullness in her face.
Number 2A, everyone is usually a little hotter in their 20s. Male attractiveness does seem to have a longer shelf life, provided he takes care of himself, and it also feels intuitively true that guys getting confidence in their 30s that they didn't have in their 20s is like a pretty common experience. It was definitely the case for me, but the early 20s being peak hotness is a constant among genders no matter how much money the guy ends up making. Yeah, there are guys in their 20s who have baby fat and peach fuzz and really come into their own skin in their 30s, but there are also guys who enter their 20s fit and athletic and enter their 30s jowled and beer-bellied. Is there anyone on earth who will claim that this is not more attractive than this? Number 2B, but dating is more fun in your 30s. Dating in your 20s is awkward as fuck, probably because in your 20s you're awkward as fuck. Dating in your 20s consists of things like worrying about how and when to ask the woman out, waiting for her to respond to your text and trying to figure out how long you should take before responding back, deciding whether or not she's sending you signs that she wants you to kiss her if you're reading into it too much, freaking out over whether or not you're giving her the best sex she's ever had, trying to parse out the definition of talking to other people, and so on. You know, dating in your 30s works. You tell the fucking chick you like her, you ask her if she wants to go on a date, maybe she says no, but probably she says yes. Then as long as you don't fuck it up by sending her a picture of your dick or whatever, you're probably gonna fuck on the first date because you're both adults, you've both got shit to do, and neither of you wants to waste your time pussyfooting around what you both know you're here to do. If you scan the entire multiverse, you will never find a timeline where the minuscule boost in attractiveness someone has in their 20s is a worthwhile trade-off for how much easier and more natural it is dating as an age-aligned couple in your 30s. Number 3, the idea that older men are actually happier with younger women is literally a joke. 20-year-olds are adults, but they usually have a lot of growing to do. Most of the time, 20-year-old women and 30-year-old men's life experiences make them flat-out incompatible for deep relationships that involve sex and romance. This is anecdotal and therefore not admissible as real evidence, but to me, the typical trajectory of older men dating younger women is exemplified by this friend I once had. He was like this ripped, wealthy, pretty boy, so he obviously had his pick of any women he wanted, and he usually went for women in their late teens and early 20s, despite his being 30. And he was just in a constant state of misery over his girlfriend's supposedly, quote, fucking with his mind. He'd like vent to me nonstop about how, you know, she's being so cruel to him and she's manipulating him and she's making him jump through all these crazy hoops and whatnot. And yeah, he used to just vent to me nonstop, and I would just tell him, dude, she isn't fucking with your mind. She's 20 goddamn years old. She doesn't know who she is yet, let alone how to build a healthy life with a mature 30-year-old partner. I mean, honestly, whether it's a short-term fling or a longer-term relationship, the idea of surrounding yourself with people that much younger and less mature than yourself just seems sad to me, and it only really makes sense if you have this weird, unhealthy, paternalistic view of sex and relationships.
And you might think, well, those girls are just babies. They're immature. They don't know anything yet. And it's like, most guys don't care about that. Okay, most guys just want arm candy. And most guys, they could work with a girl's immaturity.
Well, if all you want is arm candy, then you know exactly what you're getting into, and I don't want to hear any bitching about how she's like fucking with your mind or whatever.
These girls are just babies. They're so immature. They don't know anything yet. They're stupid. And it's like, that's not true either, because I've dated a lot of girls in their 20s who are way more mature than women I've ever met in their 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Oh, that's pretty convenient. So it turns out that not only are women in their 20s hotter than women in their 30s and 40s, they're also more mature too. That works out pretty well for you. But do you really think that 20-year-olds are more mature than 30-year-olds? Or are you just deliberately conflating a woman's inability to advocate for herself and insist on equitable treatment in her personal relationships with maturity?
Guys do not want a masculine, overbearing overbearing, controlling, domineering career woman to be their girlfriends, to be their wives. Real men, masculine men, want a feminine woman. Okay, and any guy who doesn't want that is a complete faggot. Okay, he's generally a beta bitch. These guys that you see at these pussy marches, at the women's march.
Number 4, male attractiveness is a combination of factors and not related to career and financial prospects alone. So a lot of red pill types will begrudgingly accept that women in their 30s can be hot too, as long as they, make a special effort to stay active, go to the gym, keep themselves looking feminine and stylish, etc.
I will admit, I've seen some 30 and 40-year-old women that I'm like, wow, she's still pretty hot. Right? She's probably not as hot as she was when she was like 22, but she's still hot.
It seems self-evident that the same is true of men. Someone who spent their 20s building a good career by the time they're 30 is not going to be bringing in tail left and right if he's overweight, has male pattern baldness, doesn't groom, and doesn't know any music or film that have come out since he left high school. He'll be taken a lot more seriously by women than he would if he wasn't financially well off, sure. And if he never got any attention from women in his 20s, this is going to feel miraculous to him. But the qualities that make someone either successful or not successful with women in their 20s generally follow them into their 30s. If you lacked confidence in your 20s, you'll most likely lack confidence in your 30s. If you were too shy to ask someone out in your 20s, you will most likely be too shy to ask them out in your 30s. The only men who are going to consistently experience a sexual prime in their 30s, like the ones red pillars like to talk about, where they're like bringing in women 15, 20 years younger than them on a regular basis, are the vanishingly small number of men who achieve crazy degrees of wealth or celebrity status.
Okay, let's use him as an example. He's 36, he's coming up on 40. You tell me that dude doesn't walk in someplace and he's not going out with a 22-year-old if he wants to. Even if they don't know what he does for a career. It doesn't matter. Henry Cavill, he's not going to bother with 30-something with kids. No way. Not going to happen.
Yes, Joker, but most men are not Henry Cavill. Pointing to guys like, Henry Cavill or Leonardo DiCaprio or whoever and telling men everywhere, yes, sir, that's going to be you one day, is deceptive to the point of being straight up immoral. Like, oh yes, tell your audience of mostly socially inept men who need to go to YouTube for the basics of how dating works, that what they need to be doing is hitting on the youngest women possible. No way does that have the potential to end really badly. Number 5, most people want to settle down by the time they're in their 30s. So as much as it belies red pillars to think about this because, they've developed an entire narrative and philosophy around this not being the case, in terms of basic wants and needs, most men and women have more in common than they have in differences. Out in the real world, most people don't plan out their life in terms of how to maximize the number of decades they can spend hooking up with strangers every night. Most people fuck a lot when they're young and figuring themselves out, get bored of that, find love, and settle down. Most people end up with some degree of a romantic happy ending, even if it isn't the one they dreamed about when they were little. They tend to marry whoever they happen to fall in love with, mostly, not entirely, but mostly irrespective of age, money, and hotness, and either be more or less happy for the rest of their lives or break up for reasons that have nothing to do with what red pillars like to talk about. I don't know, when I look at the sorts of 30s, 40s, and 50s-year-old women who tend to show up in my life, I just don't see lonely, miserable people obsessed with finding a high-value man. And likewise, when I see men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, I don't usually see unstoppable Leo-esque pussy slayers. In both cases, I usually just see people who are either in relationships with partners who are pretty good matches, or they're not and they don't worry about it too much because they know they will be eventually.
I've seen a lot of guys in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, even their 70s, still crushing it out there. These guys are easily still dating women in their 20s, like it's nothing.
This is just not normal behavior, right? Like, normal people don't spend their 40s all the way through their 70s trying to date teenagers and early 20-somethings. Number 6, the definition of terms like Chad and sexual market value are, in general, really inconsistent. So in the incel community, the term Chad makes a lot of sense. They're not getting laid at all, so anyone who gets laid a lot is a Chad. Simple and straightforward. When you introduce the term in a context where you're trying to make nuanced observations about how gender relations work, it starts making a lot less sense. So there's one interpretation where a Chad is like the bad boy archetype. People like James Dean, Jordan Catalano, Spike, Trent Lane, that kind of guy. Maybe like an artist or a local rock musician who lives in a cheap apartment, parties all the time, and, isn't really bound for a life of success, but who right now women swoon over and throw themselves at. Except that doesn't work because, according to the red pill, women are attracted to status, money, and success, and these guys are like the hard opposite of that. Honestly, this is the type of guy who would write songs and poems and make independent films about the women they like going after the Chads and Tyrones. Okay, so in that case, a Chad is someone with a good job, lots of money, and lots of social influence. In other words, Don Draper or or what's his fuck from 50 Shades of Grey. The problem is that, according to the Red Pill, these are the guys who average men start to resemble more and more as they age into their 30s, when their SMV is supposed to be at its highest. And maybe you're thinking like, yeah, that's the point. If a guy knows how to stay on his grind and work on himself, most of them can go through a phase of themselves being a Chad. Except that doesn't work either, because according to the Red Pill, stable, hardworking, successful guys who didn't get a lot of attention from women in their 20s are the guys who are most in danger of fulfilling the beta bucks part of the equation. These are the guys who Red Pillars are always telling to watch out when their life starts showing results, because the same women who used to reject them are now going to want to marry them for their money while cheating on them with Chad and Tyrone, who in this context are these guys. This very concept is so weaselly and ill-defined that you essentially have no choice but to conclude that the only consistent definition of a Chad is man who I feel sexually threatened by. The fact is, this inconsistency is fatal to the entire alpha fucks beta bucks narrative. It shows that people at different stages of their lives tend to be attracted to different qualities, and that the very concept of sexual market value isn't a predictable rule that you can punch into a fucking graphing calculator to predict what will and will not make a person appealing to the opposite sex. And sure, it can be useful in the broadest strokes possible. In fact, for some guys, it'd probably be pretty beneficial to have a firmer grasp on. I used to know this fat, smelly, 40-year-old beardo who used to like fall head over heels in love with the hottest, youngest, and most desirable women in the rock scene here in Hollywood, and get just miserable and depressed when he'd find out that they don't return his attraction. And guess who he'd call at 1 in the morning to complain about it? You just wanted to grab this guy by his Lay's potato chip grease encrusted Grand Funk Railroad shirt that he's probably had since high school, and just go, look, pull yourself together. Look at you. You're like a 3 tops. And these women you're crying yourself to sleep at night over are easily perfect 10s. Get yourself into the gym, buy some cooler clothes, shower more often, and go find a woman closer to your own level. You're not going to find yourself a knockout Playboy model, but if you get your shit together, there's no reason you can't get into a relationship that makes you happy. But in general, if you're not some really obvious outlier like that guy was, you're not making your life any easier by categorizing all women and men by objective numeric rankings and calculating the highest number that you can possibly bring in. The only numeric system I've ever found useful when applied to the human beings in my life is binary code. Does this person bring joy, satisfaction, and betterment to my life? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then I literally don't care about anything else. And you might say,
but what about all those dating profiles and chat thread screenshots where the woman says, you know, I'm overweight and have 3 kids, but you have to be 6'3", make 6 figures, drive a Ferrari, etc. Don't those prove my point? What do you think is going to happen to them?
well, they're probably going to end up alone and unhappy unless they adjust their standards, just like men in their 40s who won't marry anyone who isn't 23 years old and still a virgin.
I need one with a B car.
I'm not saying there are no women out there like the ones Red Pill guys like to talk about. There are always going to be people you can point to who conform to any negative stereotype you can imagine. But that really doesn't prove anything other than who you are and what you're choosing to focus your energies on. You could just as easily make a fucking YouTube channel where you compile stories about couples who get together under really unique and amazing circumstances and live in happy marriages for the rest of their lives. But guess what? You don't. Instead, you choose to focus on stories where men and women make each other miserable and fuck each other out of any opportunity for happiness. Presumably because that's what stirs people's fear and outrage in a way that makes them susceptible to your public therapy sessions about your insecurities with women, half-heartedly dressed up as a fringe gender ideology. In conclusion, Red Pillars are not wrong that money and status for men and youthful good looks for women are key components to what makes them attractive. They're also not wrong that men tend to date a little younger and women tend to date a little older. But if you take these principles to their extreme, you end up with ideas of sex and dating that bear absolutely no resemblance to how people actually behave. Most people don't give a fuck about having a high-status partner. They're looking for someone they can drink vodka and watch Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead with. How successful or unsuccessful you are with dating in your 30s is usually in the same ballpark as how successful you were in your 20s, and most people end their dating life happily partnered with someone on their same level. So if I had to cherry pick the best and truest ideas related to, you know, the wall and sexual market value and present them in a way that I thought would be the most beneficial to the most people, it would probably go something like this. Men, if you're 20 years old and not getting laid, try not to worry about it too much. Focus on bettering yourself. Exercise, learn some skills, find a look that works well for you, and get a tight circle of good friends. You're not going to see the results immediately, but over the next 5 or 10 years, your life is going to improve pretty significantly, and it's going to make you naturally more appealing to women. Also, you're not obligated to date anyone you're not attracted to. Period. End of story. But if you legitimately aren't attracted to anyone near your age and maturity level, you may want to consider the possibility that you're adding a lot of stress and hardship to your life that, just putting this out there, may not be worth the benefit of a slightly younger girlfriend. And lastly, if the only thing keeping your mental health together is watching middle-aged guys in their fucking car reassure you that one day you're gonna have the last laugh when the captain of the cheerleader squad comes crawling back after 25 5 years to say that not going to the prom with you was the biggest mistake she ever made, and that you're going to get to throw it in her face that she's now fat and old and you've got a hot 22-year-old waiting for you at home, please, please talk to a real therapist.
I find you immensely attractive, Anthony.
Your problems with women matter, and you don't deserve to have the responsibility for your mental well-being put into the hands of these bullshit artists who tell you a slate of comforting lies in exchange for your clicks and your dollars.
Jump into my monthly online coaching program where I am teaching guys just like you how to go out there and approach and close the hottest women on the planet. I'm talking 8s, 9s, and 10s. These are the exact same type of women that myself and my students are out there approaching and closing every single week. And the first month of coaching lesson is only $1. Okay, so it's only $1 for the entire first month of coaching lessons.
And to the women, if you're in your 20s and getting tons of attention from men because of your looks, get that shit, queen. Seriously, live your life in whatever way feels right. Just understand that your looks are not going to last forever. So you should hopefully be making an effort to, build an education, a support system, and an interesting personality so that you don't become one of those middle-aged women who writes op-eds in Salon about how men are such jerks because they don't buy you free shit everywhere you go anymore. Also, yes, getting older is kind of scary, but as long as you take care of yourself and you aren't holding out for literally Henry Cavill, you're gonna have more than enough dating and marriage options well into your 30s, 40s, and 50s. The only people in your same age group who are gonna give a rat's ass about how old you are borderline pedophilic weirdos like this Ralph Macchio looking motherfucker right here.
Hey, I just want to get photographed getting a hand job from you. I'll pay cash.
This process is called